Yeah, recording here. Okay.
Subject does not have permission to create live video on this group. Why?
Okay, so for the people watching on YouTube, this is going to be a Clubhouse room discussion about demystifying hypnosis. And do we need to make it simpler? Do we need to kind of cut out the jargon and the woo-woo bits and just kind of simplify what hypnosis is all about? So just while we're getting the room all together, just kind of bear with us, and the live conversation with guests will be coming up very soon.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting talk. I'm just pushing this onto Facebook as we speak. I'm doing it via my meetups page, Adam. Yeah, so everyone, obviously, let's just get into the Clubhouse and
hypnosis. Tom, here's Adam.
Hello, how are we?
Hey, how you doing? It's Graham.
Very good. The dream team is here with absolutely no guests whatsoever.
We did a second ago, but
we did. Yeah, Rowan frightened her off.
We get some feedback from someone. It's like when someone goes into a shop and there's no one else.
So, gents, good evening. Obviously, we have got 4 of us here, but I believe, yeah, we've got the 4 of us all up here. Steve, can you just make the rest of us moderators as well, so we can all manage?
Underneath.
Next to our name, it says make moderator. There we go. So for everyone on Facebook and whether you're watching the replay on YouTube, we're actually here. We've actually made our whole group a bit bigger. We've got Steve Barker, we've got Adam, and we've got Rowan, who's been with us, and this is the first time this year. Rowan, welcome back. Hope everything's well, my mate.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a hectic year, but things are settling down now. So,
you hear me? Back. Oh wait, there. I know what I've done. I've turned everything down. I need to turn it. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Did you hear me? Welcome everybody.
Yeah,
yes, it is.
You're still coming through, yeah.
Do you know what? You try and use technology and it all goes crazy. But yeah, obviously. Yeah. Derek, welcome. Hope everything's good.
Hey, Derek.
Gents, I think we just spend the next minute or so if we just ping some people who we all know think would appreciate being in here for the good old chin wag and get everything going. But yeah, so hypnosis, should we keep it simple? That's what we're going to be talking about tonight. I think it's I think it ties in fantastically after last week's brilliant conversation that we had. And like, you know, the way this is going to all come together, I think it's just really good in that way too. So should we keep it simple? Should we concentrate on making sure that they always know how to work on ego states, or whether we should be doing multi-level nesting loops and all that sort of stuff? Should we even tell the clients we're doing that? Anyone?
Yeah, I think the thing that triggered it for me was I was reading a comment on a thread about the idea, and say this isn't my thoughts necessarily, the idea that we should give they were talking about sort of bilateral action of the brain, and they said, well, you know, if you give the analytical critical part, I think that's the way they termed it, of the brain something to go away and have a chew on, that gives more direct access to the other parts of the brain. I'll say that was somebody else's words, not mine, and it just got me thinking, how much detail do we need to give? I think most people take the view that simple is probably best, but do we want to dumb it down too far? Some people go all the way through to giving neurological explanations. Some people go into this is with their clients, whether it's state versus non-state and this sort of thing. So I suppose the premise is, how simple do we need to make hypnosis and our practice in general to be effective? And what degree of detail should we give clients?
I really like this topic. I think it's I think it's interesting. And I think the answer is nuanced, because, you know, for me, the most important thing about hypnosis, what makes hypnosis rather than just kind of guided meditation, is calibration, is changing what we do depending on the feedback and response we get from the client. So in my personal opinion, and this is me kind of setting my stall as to how I think this conversation is going to go. If you've got someone that is really craving explanation, I'm one of these people that if I go to a mechanic, I like them to explain what they're doing. If I go to the dentist, I want to know what's going on, you know, because it helps me understand the process. Other people wouldn't want to know anything. And I think if we're, as good hypnotists do naturally, we calibrate, you know, effortlessly. And therefore, if you get a sense that the client, you know, they're raising their eyebrows, they kind of, they want a bit more explanation, great, we can give them more explanation. If when you give them any kind of explanation, their eyes are kind of looking, you know, lost and confused, then simplify it maybe with a metaphor or an analogy. I think we simplify it as much as we can for what we're doing to be effective. But sometimes I feel like giving an explanation of what's going under the hood, if you like, can actually increase the effectiveness of the suggestions, because effectively it's the equivalent of, here's the sciencey bit. This thing that you've just experienced, here's why it actually works. If they take the explanation, and if that explanation is delivered with congruency and authority, what you've effectively done is you've cemented the suggestions in the suggestion, or you've kind of laid the groundwork if it's in the pre-talk, so that when they get the suggestions, they're more receptive to them. That's my take on it. I think it isn't a one size fits all approach, but that's my opinion. I'd love to hear what everyone else thinks.
I completely agree with that last bit where you're saying it, not one size fits all. Of course not. If you're dealing with a client who likes control of everything to manage their anxiety, then clearly you're going to be wanting to tell them a little bit more than what you tell everyone else. At the same time, though, when it comes to this, I like to draw this all the way back to the pre-talk. How much should you be telling your client during the pre-talk, or how much should you be keeping layman rather than anything in depth? Should you be trying to tell science or the reasons as to why this happens, or should you just be simply saying something that triggers them to create compliance due to the fact that just because they understand, because that whole layman approach has been adapted, and therefore it gets them nodding along, gets them understanding. So then when it comes to everything else later on in the session, exactly like what you said, Adam, if something's happening and maybe they don't understand later, or if they didn't feel like they were hypnotized, then at that point there's a reason as to why you should say something. Now, I'm a simple person. You know, X equals 2 + 2 = 4. Simple. You know, I'm kinesthetic in my learning approach. Very, very nice and simple, easy to work with. So for me, keeping things simple definitely works. But yeah, at times, whether it is how you need something, sometimes on your consultation, maybe you need to explain yourself a little bit. But for me, keeping it simple really can bring that whole approach right down to the level that's required in order to be able to share. Rowan or Steve, have you got anything?
I think
we've come off at the same time. Go for it, Rowan. Go for it.
I was just going to say, you know, I agree with both of what you guys are saying there, that one size doesn't fit all. For me, I think, you know, what Graham was saying there about the pre-talk, that's a really important part of it. But in that pre-talk, you're gauging what sort of level of intellect the client is and what they're looking for, how much information they actually need. And, you know, things like timeline therapy and stuff like that, I go through quite a complex explanation of what we're actually doing with that and how it's working with the affect bridge and sort of state dependent learning and things like that. So I go into quite a lot of detail if I'm doing sort of direct stuff or timeline stuff with most of my clients. But if I'm doing metaphorical stuff, then I'll tend to not bother. So again, it depends on the clients and on the sort of type of session I'm working with, and quite oftentimes on the sort of the problem that the client has as well there.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think, as Adam said, and we've all agreed, being able to calibrate to the clients and present the relevant amount of detail is the key thing. And there's various different approaches that the different people have. I was just thinking of David Snyder, and I can't think of a time when I've seen him really give any kind of what you might call a technical explanation to a subject. I mean, yes, he does when he's training people, but that's a very different thing. But I was going to contrast that with Melissa Tiers, and I don't know if you've seen her use her bilateral stimulation technique, where you're passing the ball in front of your face. It's got a little bit of EMDR type work thrown into it as well. And she's getting the customer to pass this ball backwards and forwards, and they're trying to bring that feeling back, and they can't. And she says, and that's right. And the reason this works, and then she goes into a very nice little explanation as they're doing it, which kind of reinforces and underlines that. And I think that's a very neat approach to it. So yeah, it comes back to pre-talk, but there's also, I think, from Melissa Tiers, this idea of what you might call post-talk, which is sort of cementing or reinforcing it. So there we go. So
I haven't seen the video or anything of that, Steve, but when she's going through it, is it that she's saying the actual scientific term, or is it more that she pushes it across as layman? So although she is saying a scientific term, it's not like in depth of exactly what's happening, but it's something that the client would understand.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can't remember her words exactly, so I'm certainly not quoting her on this, but it would be something along the lines of, and the reason this works is because that negative thought, emotion that you had is like an electrical discharge in the right-hand part of your brain, and as you're moving the ball from the left to the right, you're activating your left brain, and then your right brain, and then your left brain, and then your right brain, and that's being carried with it, and that's why you can't bring that feeling back now. Keep trying. That's right. You can't bring it back. And it kind of, it's the old thing from sales. And, those of us who've been in sales will remember the maxim: tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you've told them. And she's very much doing that. It's sort of like underlining it afterwards. But I don't think I've necessarily seen Melissa Tiers do much in terms of pre-talk directly with the client. There's always, of course, pre-talk we have through our websites, through our marketing, through any videos we have on YouTube that people watch or that we send to clients as well. But has anybody from the audience got any views on this at this stage? Anybody like to come up and
raise your hand? We'll get you up on stage if you have maybe questions or any kind of points or just anecdotes of when you've maybe overcomplicated things and kind of help, maybe that broke rapport and you had to kind of salvage it, or maybe you tried to simplify it too much and that actually caused some kind of issues. Raise your hand, we'll get you up on stage. We'll kind of explore your experiences. Yeah, I think that's really good points there, Steve. I'm a big fan of the post talk as a way to check in with the client afterwards, just to see what's landed, what hasn't, and then provide an explanation. Sally, welcome up on the stage. What was your question or point?
It wasn't really a question. It was just a point, really. I think it depends on the client. Some are maybe, I don't want to use capable, but understanding deeper explanations, and some aren't. So it's always like I try and share some things with the client and see how we go. And then if they want to know anything deeper, then I go into it then. So for me, that works. I'm not an expert in everything, obviously. And there are some things that I know. So I go as far as I feel comfortable as well.
I think that makes sense. And just to use Steve's point there on the analogy with sales, there are some people that sell that understand the science of sales and the psychology of sales, and they can sell and they can explain what they're doing. But in my experience, there's a lot of great salespeople that can sell very well, but they can't really explain what they're doing and how they're doing it. They just do it well. And I'm pretty sure that's also going to be the case with hypnotists as well. There's going to be some great hypnotists that actually, if it came down to explaining what they're doing and how they're doing it, they probably couldn't, but that doesn't mean that they're a less effective hypnotist, if that makes sense. So I don't think as hypnotherapists, we have to, kind of explain everything that's going on. And Graham, I know you've got a background in magic. To some extent, if you explained every trick that you do after every trick, I think you dilute the experience of the client. Actually, the mystifying element is what makes magic work. I think the mystifying element actually helps hypnosis sometimes because it leaves them with this kind of special experience. And if we demystify it too much, we're kind of taking the shiny veneer of hypnosis and making it less appealing than it actually is. Sometimes I think a little bit of mysticism is actually helpful. Don't know what your thoughts are, Graham, with your magic background.
No, absolutely. And with everything you're just saying there, hypnosis is a simple tool anyway. It's nothing that's very difficult to achieve. Mastering, same as anything, whether it is magic or any tool, is always difficult, but that just comes down to time and commitment. But yeah, absolutely. If I was to make something disappear and then literally say, oh, well, you never guess what, I'll just put it behind my hand like this, and there's a trick actually that's just recently come out called Quantum Deck by Craig Petty, and his advert is actually showing it to loads of magicians, and then obviously the best form of advertisement, and he fools everyone. And then there's one with the one bloke, he's like, oh, do you want to know how I do it? And he's like, yeah, no, I don't, no, yeah, no, and it just, it literally shows exactly what you're putting out there, is that fact of, does he really want to know? Because if he does know, then it's going to completely ruin himself as to how he could do it, or how he could. It's ruining his childhood of being able to be surprised by magic, because it's not very often a magician manages to have that. Whereas if he does know it, he knows he could go away and implement it in himself and create more fascination for people. And yeah, that's definitely what it comes to with that side. Derek, welcome up to the stage. Have you got a point you want to pass across?
Yeah, I think when a client comes to meet a hypnotherapist or a hypnotist, there's two conditions. One is, they're meeting the authority figure, and the second condition is there's a certain amount of expectation bias already in there. So I think, to a degree, giving an explanation of what you're going to do, and generally, if I do deliver an explanation, it's very, very simple. It's very basic. But I think that meets or satisfies the client's conditions. One, yes, clearly this person's authoritative. I've chosen the right person to help me with my issue. They're explaining things. They're knowledgeable. So that reinforces the authority figure. But I think, obviously, again, the client is coming here with, coming to see you with a certain amount of expectation. And again, an explanation reinforces that explanation. You're saying what's going to happen. You're conditioning them to expect that happening. So I think giving some kind of explanation is certainly beneficial to the overall experience.
Yeah, I think you made some very good points with that, Derek. And one thing I've been experimenting with recently, I wasn't having trouble, but I noticed some clients weren't doing some of their homework, and I start them off with very, very simple tasks, which are really just compliance sets when you think about it. I get them to do breathing exercises, sort of 7-11 type breathing, and I just say, like, just want you to do this for 3 or 4 minutes at a time, just for 3 times a day. Because that's 12 minutes of your time. And if you can't invest 12 minutes of your time, then, what chance have you got of getting any change? And they agree with that. And I generally find after the first week, I'd say, right, how's your homework been going? And I'd get all the excuses. So I thought, well, let's just try changing this up a little bit. So what I did was I gave them a very simple explanation of why that breathing works. I just told them about the sinoatrial nerve on the side of the heart, and how, when the heart expands when we breathe in, blood pressure and flow changes, and the nerve registers that and increases the flow, and all this sort of thing. Just a very, very simple explanation. No more than 3 minutes, perhaps. And the uptake was greatly increased. People were doing it a lot more. So I would argue that some detail is needed. Now, maybe some people might say I'm being overly complicated there, but from what I've seen with my clients, it certainly seems to have made a difference. So I'd just be interested to see if anybody else has got any anecdotes or stories from things they've tried.
I totally agree with that. I think when you give people a reason, they're more agreeable. It's that saying I have, people are reasonable when you give them reasons, and it links to Cialdini's kind of influence theory, which is when you have that reason, when you have that because, people are more compliant. So if you, whether it's setting homework or giving a suggestion, you've got a plausible, and here's the thing, it doesn't even have to be, let's be honest, real. It doesn't even have to be the actual reason. It just has to be a reason. But when you give a reason linked to some kind of request, compliance agreement goes up. So I feel as hypnotists, we've got to use every trick in the book. We've got to use every tool in our arsenal to help the client move to where they want to get to. And if that is social proof, if that is compliance techniques, not necessarily pure hypnosis, but it adds to the overall efficacy and outcome of the client, why the hell not? And I personally think, sprinkling a little bit of sciencey, and that might be jargon that they don't quite understand, but they trust that we as hypnotherapists understand that we're doing the right things. Then if that adds to the effectiveness, which is what it's all about really, is create value for the clients, why not? It's almost our duty to use whatever works.
I think.
Yeah, but I want to go back to the point Sally made earlier, and I think it's a very, very valid point. It's got to be something that we're comfortable with doing. I don't like using the word competent, because I think we can always become more competent about things. But I think it's got to be something that we are congruent about and we're comfortable talking about. And I meant to say that when Sally said a bit earlier. So thank you for saying that, Sally. I appreciate that.
That's no problem. I think I talked about it. I've got a client that's autistic, and in the consultation, I explained a few things. I did a couple of things. I did a couple of convinces with him, and when I checked in with his mum afterwards, she said, "Oh, he's a lot more optimistic since talking to you," and that's a good thing, because I think, he's looking forward to it now. He's never had hypnosis. She's had hypnosis, experienced it, and he was very, very nervous. But putting him at his ease and explaining just a few basic things that I thought he could understand made him, like I said, more optimistic, and hopefully he's looking forward to the session now.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic example there of somebody who understands things in a different way, being autistic, and being able to adapt and to change to that. So maybe it's time to sort of open this up to the other end of the scale. What about if we make it overly simplistic? Now, there's plenty of models that are used to explain hypnosis from the past, and I suppose the biggest one, the one that most people use, is referring to the conscious and the unconscious mind. And yeah, some people will say that's a fallacious explanation. Is that going too far the other way? What do people think? Maybe somebody else from the audience might like to come up and say something about that.
I think when it comes to these, because let's face it, a lot of people like to use the expandable explanation for how the brain can work, and like fears and phobias could get trapped, or energy work with the whole Peppa Pig sort of energy zapper sort of toys as well. Is that keeping it too simple? Yes and no. I think any sort of process, if I've got an anxiety client on a phone and we're doing a little consultation, by doing the simple finger squeeze techniques, explaining it really simple as to how and why it happens. I'm not a scientist. I don't know if, because I know Bob, what's his name? I'm completely blank. Demystifying some other processes. But for me, if that process fits in the layman term, Barry Neal, if that process fits in the time and the explanation can be passed over, then keeping it so simple that it passes over and it's believable that it can work, then you're creating the placebo of what's required in order for you to be able to pass over to the client and achieve the desired results that's desired. Because you just, at the end of the day, your outcome is to make, when X happens, what then followed by Y, not what they've currently got of when X happens, they get all the rest of the letters in the alphabet.
I used the expandable actually with this client, and he has one at home, so it worked perfectly. He enjoyed that bit, so that was you never know when you're going to hit on something that a client will I don't know, he sort of lit up when he saw it and then my explanation of it, and because he has one at home that he uses, he loved it.
And that's the thing, isn't it? The old teaching method of keep it simple, stupid. If you can understand what you're saying and it's that easy that you can understand it, then the other person will understand it too. And if I was to try and break down science and say, the molecular level's doing this, why at the same time the breathing level's doing this, and the blood's pumping around your body at this sort of speed, I wouldn't be able to remember all that. So by keeping it nice and simple and dynamic, some of you, as you know me, and if anyone's ever been on a course with me, you'll know what I like to do is get a good pen and draw on a board, because then I'm passing over that information nice and simple. And it's, by the way, how I see it, and it's been able to pass it over as well. So yeah, I don't tend to do that with clients. I do it with the odd thing, like if you're removing a negative thought or process, I have like a lot of drawing I like to use. But yeah, definitely 100% keep it simple.
I don't think I don't think there's any harm in starting basic and working your way up. As was mentioned earlier, you can gauge your client. If you start talking about Peppa Pig, you can tell by the expression of the body language, oh, please give me, cut me some slack here. I'm not that thick, I'm not that stupid. You can bring your explanations up a level to meet them. You'll know where you've met their level of understanding and appreciation, and they'll appreciate the fact that you've taken into consideration the level of understanding you're pitching it at a level they appreciate. You can gauge it. I mean, by all means, start stupid and work your way up very rapidly, simply by looking at the way they react.
I can change the subject a bit. Like I do bookkeeping, and I've had one of the clients I was dealing with back last year, his accountant just came on the phone and asked me questions about bookkeeping, and because I knew the answers and I could expand on that, he knew I knew what I was talking about. Whereas if the person who was doing it before me wasn't experienced in bookkeeping accounts and so couldn't answer a lot of his questions, so that sort of really satisfied him that I about my experience, and I knew that I knew what I was talking about.
Yeah, and listening to what Adam was saying earlier about Cialdini, correct me if I'm wrong, Adam, is this what Cialdini calls appeal to authority? It ties in with uniforms and that sort of thing. I mean, obviously we're not wearing a uniform, but we're talking in an authoritative way. And as Derek said just now, we can adapt that. We can move up from Peppa Pig level to something a little bit more, dare I say it, grown up or complicated, if you like. But we are establishing ourselves as the authority, which is another point that Derek made earlier on, where we're we're putting our stamp of authority on there, and that is, I think, reassuring to clients that they know they're dealing with somebody who's going to be competent enough to help them through this. I'd be interested to see what people have to think about that.
Yeah, in the book itself, Steve, it's actually an entirely different chapter, I think, that was, so it's a different principle of influence rather than appeal to authority. But, you know, obviously, you know, anyone familiar with the Milgram experiments and many others, you've got the kind of the prisoners and the kind of the officials. Obviously, Hollywood's taken that and kind of run with it, but effectively, people are more compliant and they're more happy to follow suggestions when they're dealing with someone that is authoritative. I think the principle of because being so effective is that if you give people a reason why you're doing something, then it answers the motivation question of why would I do this kind of thing? And if you've already preempted that and said, well, because of this bit, and let's say you've given a reasonable explanation of what the request is or why you've done what you've done, I think that's why it increases either the compliance if it's a request or the suggestion if it's in hypnosis. But I don't think it's a bad thing as well, particularly for authoritarian hypnotists, to kind of embrace that element of authority, and that can come from clothing, it can come from the offices, it can come from certificates on the wall. I mean, there's lots of ways that you can kind of increase, you know, that element of perceived authority. But at the moment, I think we're mainly talking about demystifying hypnosis within the client sessions. And I think there's another way of looking at this as well, which is in the marketing and the branding and the client acquisition. You know, do you know, it'd be interesting to ask people on the panel, but anyone in the audience as well. Do you use jargon? Do you use scientific explanation and that kind of stuff in blog posts or in social media posts or in you know, for you, Steve, I know you do Google AdWords. Do you use it in that, or do you keep it simple, or do we think clients don't really care about the science behind it? They just want to have confidence that you can help them with their particular problem?
I think that on the back of, you know, what you're saying there, depending on where you're putting that post, you know, if it's on a specific forum for a specific thing, you can go into technical detail a lot more because you're automatically sort of assuming that the group on Facebook or whatever has a certain understanding of this concept or this issue that they're dealing with, whether it be FND or anxiety or something like that. So it depends massively. I personally do talk in quite a lot of jargon quite a lot of the time, and I think that actually has a beneficial effect. There's a sort of simplistic explanation of hypnosis, but then as I'm explaining that more to them, I'll go into more complex information and I'll see them go into trance as I'm talking. And I think that using an explanation of what hypnosis is as an induction or a form of induction within your initial chat with them, maybe even, is an extremely powerful thing. It's something that Bob talks about. You know, you're already in hypnosis before you've even closed your eyes, before you've gone into trance, so to speak, because trance is a hypnotic phenomenon rather than the other way around. And I think that as a figure of authority in this position, you know, there's a couple of things that have sort of popped up as Adam and Steve were talking there. First of all, was something I found out years ago about litterers. They'll pick up the litter for someone in a suit as much as they'll pick up for a policeman or a litter warden. So wearing a suit gives you that uniform. And I think that's like, at that point, I made a conscious decision. I was working in finance at the time to start dressing the grade above my current level in the business. And I started getting promotions and pay rises and things like that because I was being seen as being this authority within that field effectively. So I think there's a sort of element to both of it. But one of the things that sort of struck me in all this is we're using the format system. You know, we're using the NLP format system in how we're doing this. So what if, why, how, what, as we're explaining it, and we have to explain it to a certain level for them. But if we can give them those 4 parts, then the suggestions seem to stick better for my clients anyway. I'm not sure about you guys, but that's my tuppence on it.
Yeah, I think again, there's some good points there, and I'm glad. Just picking up on what you were saying just there, Rowan. You saying about sort of dressing I think you used the expression maybe a notch above, and this is all part of the prestige we build, and I'm glad we've got Derek on here tonight, because I was just thinking about it's not just necessarily the words that we say, however technical or simple they are, it's how we deliver them. And that's a product of body language, which of course is one of is Derek's sort of métier. So I'll be interested to hear what you might have to say about that, Derek, as to how we communicate rather than what we communicate.
Oh, don't get me started. Yeah, it's quite fun actually. I don't know if you noticed, but when I was presenting at Bob Burns' masterclass a couple of weeks back, I was attending as an attendee as well as a guest speaker. And oddly enough, I don't know if anyone actually noticed, but during the break, just before I became the guest speaker, I actually changed from wearing a sweater to a crisp white shirt. And basically,
I didn't notice that. No, you had me fooled on that. I didn't see that at all.
No, and that was purely because I became the authoritative figure, and I didn't want to be the comfy, fluffy jumper person. But I was talking about, well, what was speaking on at that time, for those that weren't there, was body language and how to build rapport with your clients. And so I actually did that as a deliberate act to unconsciously, change the mindset and change everyone's perception of me. I was slightly annoyed because Bob at the time kept referring to me as a mentalist and a magician, which I am, which is fine, but I wasn't that in at that time. For those that don't know, I'm a body language analyst. I work mainly for mainstream media, magazines, TV, radio, doing body language analysis, VIPs and celebs. I mentioned stuff like OK Magazine. I covered Prince Philip's funeral live for OK Magazine as they popped my comments on the internet as I spoke to them, stuff like that. But yeah, I think rapport and perception is all part of the job. Building rapport with your client. Linguistics is a huge part of that. I'm sure we're all aware of that. Really, to be honest, it's kind of bread and butter stuff. You use their language and deliver it back to them. You use their phrases and deliver it back to them. And it's important, I guess, if you listen to your client, you get a good feel for where they're at, how much they want to know. Are they interested? Do they express an interest in how things work? What are the mechanics? And you gauge their interest and deliver what they want to hear.
Yeah, totally agree with that. That element of calibration and kind of meeting the client at their level, I think is a very valid point. I also think that, from that Rowan's point about kind of authority and that kind of stuff, for a long, probably for the first 3 or 4 years of being a hypnotherapist, I just made the conscious decision to wear a 3-piece suit and a tie. And I was familiar with the principle of the halo effect and the impact of, that kind of initial perception. But when I was wearing that kind of, expensive three-piece suit and the tie and the cufflinks and all that kind of stuff, clients were more suggestible. It's as simple as that. They were way more responsive. And I've come from a marketing background. I split tested this. Occasionally I would go in and just kind of have, a smart jumper or something like that. And it wouldn't be the same results. And it wasn't just in the therapy room. This is kind of like, for me to get to Harley Street, I would, quite often walk through the John Lewis, that kind of gets you from, Oxford Street to towards Harley Street. And sometimes I would just kind of gauge kind of reactions, like if you're wearing a suit, people kind of, they make way for you and things like that. So it definitely helps, in terms of, unconscious compliance. If you look the part, I think more than anything else. I'm also curious, Steve, when you do your Google AdWords, one of the great things with kind of digital marketing is that you get to analyze in kind of granular detail, click-through rates, response rates, all that kind of stuff. I'm willing to bet that when you use more simple language to explain your proposition, you get higher response rates than if you've got complicated, let's say words. Does that seem like it's right based on your analysis of your marketing?
It certainly does, yeah. I've almost given up using words like hypnosis and hypnotherapy, hypnotherapist in those adverts now. What seems to work best is what I call problem/solution based adverts. People have got a problem. They've got anxiety. They've got depression, whatever it is. They've got a phobia or something, and they're Googling for that. And that's when the advert comes up. And if the message is nice and simple and generic, I tend to get a lot of clicks on that advert. But then looking at the clicks that actually converts into inquiries, it's much, much harder to trace. I mean, you need vast amounts of data to be able to draw something conclusive out of that. But where I do get a good amount of data is from when clients inquire from the website. They go onto my website, they fill in a form, or they might occasionally phone. Normally they fill in the web form. And then I send them an email out and we start a dialogue. And that's the point where I really start to do what we've just been talking about, which is calibrating to them and adapting the service that I offer to them. And you know what, with a lot of these people, I hardly even mention hypnosis. I use hypnosis with everybody. But very often at that stage, that's sort of, some people call it a strategy call. Sometimes I'll hardly even mention hypnosis. And it's all about the problems they've got and the solution they're seeking. And yes, keep it simple all the time.
They need to know enough to have confidence that you can help them. But outside of that, I think a lot of clients, they don't want to know all the ins and outs. They just want to have this sense of, enough to help them. And in the same way that, if we focus on, let's say, problem solution, you're going to get quite a good response. If you then make hypnosis the way in which you solve that problem, you're probably going to get less response. I think it would go even one step further. If you said, you're going to use NLP or a particular NLP technique to do that, response is going to get lower. And again, because effectively, the more complex you make it, the more knowledge it presupposes the audience has in order to know that bit is gonna work. I think the bit in, it's a very specific place, but I think the bit where being complicated or having, an explanation of something, where that has the most impact is directly following a suggestion. I would say pre-talk, post-talk, but all the points that we've agreed here and Derek mentioned recently, calibrate, gauge the reaction, and if you need to kind of dumb it down a little bit, then do that, because otherwise, you're being superfluous with your words. Your ego's driving what you're saying rather than actually helping the client make it at a level that they can understand. But equally, if it's too simple and they've got that kind of, come on, give me a break here, you're insulting my intelligence, give them a more thorough explanation. And I think that's where the opposite of demystifying, that's where kind of, explaining. But I would say, weirdly, there's two ways of demystifying. One is to keep it really simple and don't offer an explanation. But the other way that you can genuinely demystify is with a credible, thorough explanation. Both demystifies the thing I'm absolutely against is the deliberate mystification of it. And sometimes when I see these social media posts and they throw in the word quantum for the sake of quantum, I guarantee they know fuck all about quantum. They don't know anything about it. They're throwing it in there because they believe that it's so insanely complicated that therefore they've got more ability to influence, because people are going to say, oh, well, if it's quantum, quantum, is a genuine scientific area that has fuck all to do with a lot of mental health, in my opinion. But in my opinion, this is the deliberate mystifying of something to take advantage of clients. And I think that's the thing that doesn't help the clients, or in fact the industry, is when you do that kind of stuff. Demystifying, whether it's simplifying things or having a credible explanation, that helps. That genuinely helps. But throwing in kind of sciencey words, and sometimes, and here's the interesting thing, it's not even metaphorical. They genuinely believe that things are happening in the quantum realm or something like this. It's a little bit kind of Marvel kind of superhero kind of nonsense for me. But there is this kind of belief, I think, that it's helping in some way. And it isn't. Any of these people really using these kind of phrases, I don't think they could back it up as to kind of why that's helping, just to throw my kind of cat amongst the pigeons there.
Do you believe that's more because it can't be explained, the reason why they can get away with it? Do you know what I mean?
Totally.
So because they're putting it out there, it's.
I know one of the producers on The Secret, and if you look at The Secret is the law of attraction. Right, we've talked about the law of attraction before. Law of attraction, okay, self-fulfilling prophecy, accessing resourceful states, utilizing the reticular activating system. So at some level, yeah, the law of attraction works because you're priming yourself effectively for good results. A good 20 minutes of that movie is bullshit around what's happening at quantum vibrations. Okay, even if that was, there's no way that they can prove that that's what's actually happening. So it's the deliberate mystifying of a process to create buy-in of the belief system, in my opinion. Now it's highly possible that maybe something is happening at that level, and in I don't know, a few decades time we could prove it, but not right now. And I think it's disingenuous, and I think a lot of people they don't have a PhD in quantum engineering. They don't. So therefore, it's just using it, not ironically, not metaphorically, but as a way to deliberately confuse and manipulate clients.
I actually laughed.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say I actually laughed out loud when you said that, Adam. And I was just going to add my tuppence in the complete opposite. That I take them back through the history of hypnosis and talk to them about Freud and Jung using it and things like that, and show them that it's been a part of psychology for as long as psychology has been a thing, and demystify it that way rather than actually going into detail of explaining what the hypnosis is, because I don't think anyone can really agree on what hypnosis actually is.
We spent an hour agreeing that hypnosis couldn't be defined. So that's a challenge.
Sorry, yeah, it which goes back to what I said. If I'm not confident about something, like I wouldn't use the word quantum because I couldn't explain it. So I have to be confident in what I'm explaining to somebody before I would use it. But that's not the type of language I would use anyway. It's just my personality. But if you're laying yourself open, if you use words like that and you don't explain it properly, I'm not sure about that. I think, to be honest, Adam, I think that's the first time I've heard you swear. It made me laugh. Sorry.
You want to see what he's like off Clubhouse? Jesus, you can't stop him.
All right, okay. I need to talk to him more then.
Yeah, get him to talk to you about his quantum expletives.
Okay, yeah, Adam, conversation.
No, the thing is, like, I think, and I would say that approach is, in all honesty, more utilized by life coaches than hypnotherapists. I think hypnotherapists are way more ethical about how they market. I think they're much more genuine. I think their primary motive is much more to genuinely help their clients. I think it's the other end of the spectrum in the life coaching and a lot of other areas of personal development, where, you know, you speak to the average life coach, and top of their mind is, if they're on 5 figures, how they can get to 6 figures. If they're on 6 figures, how to get to 7 figures. It is all about extracting money from their clients rather than saving money. And from that point of view, if they figured out that having some kind of catchy phrase that people can't understand helps them put a bigger value on their proposition and therefore sell more coaching programs, they're going to do it, because there is this kind of overall obsession with, you know, kind of the financial side. Now, I'm not against people making money. I think that making money is a really positive side effect of creating value for other people. But it should be the side effect. It shouldn't be the primary motive. And if you can, you know, kind of do that in an authentic way, why not? But it's when there's kind of I think unethical approaches and language. And the reason I brought that up is that this is the opposite strategy that we're talking about. We're having a whole conversation about demystifying hypnosis. And I think there are certain areas where there is a deliberate attempt to mystify. And I guess the question that naturally follows from that is, does the deliberate mystification have a place? Does it have a role to play? Can it actually help by having an element of such high level? I mean, we did a Clubhouse on the role of confusion. If the goal of mystifying is to confuse to the level of having absolute compliance, it maybe there is a role to play. But it'd be interesting to hear what the panel think in terms of, does mystifying have a role to play?
I think there is potentially an ethical role to play for using, I don't necessarily say a mystification, but a complication, if you like. One thing I will do with some clients when I just want to give them that sort of wow factor on things is, you know, I'll tell them, you know, when you were born with 100 million neurons, and you know, if they're in their mid-50s, I'll say, look, you're over 21 now, and they have a laugh, and I said, well, you've probably got about 86 million neurons left. Each neuron's got a primary axon and up to 7,500 dendrites. So when you multiply the number of neurons you've got in your brain by the different combinations that those axons and dendrites can all connect with each other, each one of those represents a brain state. So potentially in the 20 million seconds, which we call a human life, you can have more brain states than there are subatomic particles in the known universe. And I just sit and I stare at them.
And you're under.
And I've had some of them just go under straight away. They just go into state straight away. It's fantastic. Now I'm complicating things. I'm adding some mystery and some drama into it. I'm not necessarily using it as an induction, but bloody hell, it has worked that way sometimes. So I think there is sometimes an ethical case for that. And does anybody else use anything similar like that?
No, but wow, you got me there, Steve.
I would agree with what you're saying there as well, Steve. You know, like that is basically what I'm doing with my explanations of things as well. You know, I'm explaining stuff to stuff, and you see people just go while you're doing that explanation. And I think that is really good. But one of the things that we've not covered on this yet, and something that I think is really important, is the client's perception of what hypnosis is. That needs to be demystified and effectively checked. And I think that's one of the most important things you can do in that initial consultation, is find out what their ideas about hypnosis are and check to see if there's any problems there, you know, and demystify it in that way.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And genuinely part of the pre-talk, so you get to see them at their level, and if they give a great understanding of it that's accurate, fine. There's no need to do that. But by and large, in my experience, a lot of the perceptions of what hypnosis is largely influenced by Hollywood and stage hypnosis. And there is that kind of expectation sometimes that they're going to have no memory, that they're going to be completely under the control of the therapist. And at that level, you know, kind of dispelling those myths and misconceptions, which you could argue is demystifying, very helpful, because then you can actually have a winnable game. If you don't pre-handle that, then you could do a great session, and all the way through their inner dialogue is going to be, but I'm not hypnotized. And then, it becomes very challenging.
Exactly. And I think that mainstream media thing that you touched on there, that's one of the reasons why we do have to demystify it, because, if we play into that mystery of hypnosis being this weird occult power sort of side of things, then, we're triggering the horror story in Hollywood rather than the therapy room that we're wanting to trigger. So.
Yeah, very, very valid point there. I guess in the final kind of 10 minutes or so, one of the key things that I feel could be an area that could demystify and just kind of keep things simple is the use of jargon. And I think sometimes in any industry, there's certain words that we kind of use because it's helpful for us on the inside to kind of have those phrases to kind of structure what we're doing and figure out what we're doing, but that isn't necessary for the client to be hearing or us to be using it in the conversations with them. Why don't we just go through the panel and each of us get to throw one bit of hypnosis jargon in the bin if we could, just to help maybe make hypnosis a little bit kind of simpler or cleaner or clearer. I don't know if anyone wants to get the ball rolling.
Can I go first?
Go on, Steve.
Can I just first of all put ideas of energies in the bin, energies that have not yet been discovered by science. And I was going to bring this point up a little earlier. I use a lot of EFT, the type that I was trained by Mike Mandel, the 6-point tapping. And before I've even come onto EFT, I would have gone through things like pattern interrupt. So they know what the idea of a pattern interrupt is. And then I'll give a brief historical insight into ancient Chinese qigong and energy lines running through the body, lung mai, as the ancient Chinese called them, or dragon's veins, as it means. And that you can redirect these energy forces through the body by putting in needles, acupuncture, putting pressure on acupressure, all this sort of thing. And they're nodding away because this was all relevant to them. And at the end of it, I'll just say, well, you're free to believe that if you want, but I just think it's a pattern interrupt. I think what we're doing is we're getting you to think about something, you're working out where it is in your body, what color it is, and then we're getting you to do a little operation, which you wouldn't normally do with that, and it's interrupting the pattern. And I think that's all that's going on. I stole that idea from Carl Smith, and it's made me a lot of money.
I think it's a very fair, valid point. The idea of, energy channels, again, it could be true, but I don't think we're in a position to really kind of prove that at this point in time. That said, we do have someone that is a student of Mesmer and might have a different approach there. What's your thoughts, Rowan, of that, but also what you'd like to put in the hypnosis bin?
So first of all, the energy thing, I'm of the complete opposite, Steve. I think everything's energy. And the way I look at it is a thought is an energy form, basically. An emotion's an energy form. All of it's energy. So if we want to talk about it as energy, that's fine. If we want to talk about its emotional states, that's fine. If we want to talk about its thoughts, that's fine. My personal belief is that there is a certain level of unconscious transference. I'm probably with Derek on this, that I think a lot of that's non-verbal rather than anything sort of esoteric or woo-woo. But I think that we can't discount the idea that there is a possibility that our minds can connect outside when we're in groups. And you see this in meditation in groups and things like that as well, where it's much easier to get into a state if you're in that group. And there's been stuff supposedly done by HeartMath. I'm very skeptical. I'm a sort of a positive skeptic, I suppose. I like the idea that it's possible. And I know that it's not been proven. And what you said there, Steve, about EFT is the way I looked at EFT when I first learned it as well. And the more I sort of worked with it and the more I looked at it, the more I sort of realized that that explanation that I had couldn't be proved anywhere the same as the idea of energy pathways can't really be proved. And actually, it has been shown that there is differences supposedly in the galvanic skin response acupressure points. So there's a possibility there.
Well, I'm glad you jumped in and took the counterpoint for that, because one thing I do say at the end, and you know, so I'm building them up with this almost, you know, Chinese mystical idea of energy lines and all this sort of thing, and then I sort of blow it down by saying I just think it's a pattern interrupt, pure and simple, you know, and I've already referred to that, and that sort of brings them down. And then I'll say this, I'll say, however, I've tried tapping on different parts of the body, and it doesn't work. And I know lots of other people who've tried that as well, and it doesn't work. You're welcome to try yourself, and you'll also find it doesn't work. So you've got to be precise. Now, I can't explain that, and I'll just leave that.
Well, what you've done there as well is you've given them two explanations of why this works. You've given them a sort of Eastern explanation and a Western explanation there of how it works, and both of them validate it. So whichever belief system you choose, it's just proving that it works. So I think it doesn't really matter whether you look at it as that. It's probably a little bit of both. You know, if you're saying, when I'm doing tapping with people, I do matrix reimprinting, which is a replacement for level 3 EFT, where you do sort of timeline stuff with EFT. And when I'm tapping on the client's hand, when I'm doing that on the KC point, I'm tapping at 4 hertz. I'm triggering a theta brainwave state in their system by using brainwave entrainment rhythms, the same way as you could do it with a drum beat or binaural beats or things like that. So I actually use the tapping in a slightly different way than I was taught, because I know that the brain will respond to regular rhythm. So I've got a clock in my therapy room, and I listen to the ticking, and I do 4 taps a second. So there's that sort of side of things as well. You can use the tapping as an entrainment device as well, which a lot of people don't really think about. The second question there, Adam, was what would I get rid of? And I would get rid of people rebranding old techniques. That's what I would get rid of. It's not really jargon, but this has gone on since the start of hypnosis. People will slightly modify something that's been done for eons and give it a new name and call it something special and sell it as their product. And it's not. And if they just explain that this is a technique that's been done in this field for the last 300 years or 200 years or whatever, or 100 years, 50 years, 20 years, and like we can trace it back to this person, then it gives that credibility to hypnosis being something that has worked for a long time and has been sort of pushed to the side by mainstream big pharma, which is what I think has actually happened with hypnosis. I don't think they like that this works. So that's what I get rid of.
Yeah, I think that's a very safe assertion that everyone's kind of repackaging the same approaches. Why do they do that? Well, from a marketing point of view and from a positioning point of view, it kind of works. And if you look at any of the major hypnosis conferences, all of them have pretty much developed a protocol or a system or an acronym, and that's why they're there, because it legitimizes them as an authority and helps them sell training. But you're right, it's a bit cynical. What I'm throwing into the bin is acronyms. Too many acronyms in our industry. It's fine for us who understand them, but whether it's kind of NLP or RTT, all this kind of EFT, I think it adds to the mystification as far as clients are concerned. So what I'm throwing in the bin is every single acronym. It's all in the bin. Graham, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I'm a bit quiet. There you go. Yeah, so for me, the one thing, and it probably ties in for tonight, whatever the time, is those who believe they have to tell people exactly what's going on when they're not necessarily the most confident at telling it anyway. When it comes to fully sharing content of what's happening, you have to have an element of instructor sort of ability about you, because if you're not that confident at speaking like out verbally to push everything, you may, although you know it, you may not get that across enough, and it can really dilute what it is you're trying to share. So if that's the case, learn how to keep it a lot simpler. and because it's then simpler, you can take it up on point, and don't try and tell people what they don't need to be told just because you think they need to be told.
One of the things that Bob does that's really good for this is he'll say at the start, and you guys all know this, he'll say, look, forgive me, I'm going to oversimplify this. I'm going to explain it as though you're 7-year-olds. Is that okay? And I think that's a really good way of hitting that nail on the head, Graham.
Absolutely. And you know, I've always keep it simple, stupid. If my little kids can understand it, so can anyone else. And yeah, it's a bang on that. And the other thing with Bob, you know, SW, some will, some won't, so what? I think tonight's been another really, really good chat. Again, you know, we are like borderline a year of starting this now. I think it's next week. It's actually the full year, and that's exactly how me and Steve started this. Is just keeping the chats with simple content and be able to bring the commonalities of what we do under hypnosis together. And also, I think it's really nice. Yes, we've had a couple of people join as well, but we've got we're coming like the loose women of Clubhouse now. We've got 4 of us to be able to join in on board, and it's really great to have that extra community and extra voices to be able to share with everyone. So yeah, thank you very much for this evening, everyone. Has anyone got anything want to say to finish off?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, you know, thank you to our audience for coming along tonight. Whether people have come up to the stage or not, it's always great to see people here. And for those who you know maybe thought they've been on the edge of just wanting to say something, just do it, because it gives you such a boost of confidence when you've gotten over that first, you know, little bit of being on stage. And I remember the first time I did it on a Clubhouse, I think it was on one of Laurie Hammond's Clubhouses. And I'm reasonably used to public speaking, and I wasn't apprehensive or anything. But it's just such a confidence boost when you can come up and speak on these things. And feel free to disagree with us, because we're here to discuss it. You know, you've heard us, me and Rowan disagree about something tonight, and that's good. It's good to have differences of opinions, because that's how we learn from each other. So yeah, please come up on stage next time.
Absolutely. Also, a very quick one. If you have a friend who couldn't be here tonight to listen to this has been recorded. So if you come back or send someone into this group, they'll be able to re-listen to this. Obviously, we've got it on Facebook as well. We've also got it onto YouTube. But yeah, if you think there's been anything advantageous. Adam, was you going to share something?
No, just to say it's been a really interesting conversation. And, you know, if you're in the either up on the panel or in the audience and you want a particular suggestion for a topic or anything like that, you know, I think a lot of you are already connected to us, but you can kind of use that little aeroplane thing to drop us a message, or you can hit our bios, connect to us on Instagram, and then send us a message there. So if there is any kind of ideas, suggestions, topics that you would love that we discuss, and also we're very open-minded to guest moderators as well. So if there's something that you're very knowledgeable on, and you feel like you could, you know, let's say lead a conversation on that, great, let us know as well, because it's a very male panel that we have at the moment. So we're quite keen to kind of open it up, get other people also involved. So if you have got any topics that you feel like you want to guest host with us, let us know.
Absolutely. Everyone, thank you very much. Really have a great week, and we'll see you all very soon. Well, next week. Hey.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Bye.